3 weeks after October 13, 1917, Portugal's most feared atheist journalist checked himself into a psychiatric facility. His medical records say acute nervous exhaustion and recurring episodes of terror. His name was Avelino de Almeida. 21 days earlier, he walked into a muddy field with one goal: destroy the Catholic Church's credibility forever. 12 minutes later, something happened that made him refuse to sleep in a dark room for the rest of his life. The doctor wrote that Almeida kept repeating 2 words: the observer. He said he saw something in the sun that looked back at him, and he wasn't alone. The atheist physician standing next to him resigned from his university position 3 months later. His only explanation: I saw something that saw me. But here's what breaks everything. While Almeida was having his breakdown, 70,000 other people were watching the same impossible thing happen. The sun broke loose from the sky and began falling toward Earth. Scientists, doctors, journalists from Portugal's largest atheist newspaper, all there to mock 3 peasant children who promised a miracle. They came to laugh, but they left on their knees in the mud, screaming for forgiveness. And here's the part that should keep you awake. While 70,000 people in Fatima watched the sun plunge toward Earth, astronomers 100 miles away saw nothing. The sun wasn't moving. Which means either 70,000 people hallucinated the same thing at the exact same time, or something chose to show itself only to them. 3 illiterate children predicted this. They gave the exact date, the exact time, the exact location, 3 months in advance. They told a government official who threatened to boil them in oil. They announced it in newspapers. They gave skeptics 3 months to prepare their debunking. And when October 13 arrived, it happened exactly as they said. But 2 of those children died within 3 years. The church says Spanish flu. But here's what they won't explain. Why did both children predict their own deaths down to the month? Why did a 9-year-old girl tell hospital staff she chose to keep suffering to save souls? And why does the Vatican refuse to release their complete medical records? Because when doctors examined their bodies years later, they found something in their tissue samples, something they described as crystalline structures that shouldn't exist in human cells. Those findings were removed from the official report. They're still classified. And the prophecies, that's what makes this impossible to dismiss. The woman who appeared to these children told them 3 secrets about the future. She predicted World War II would begin during the next Pope's reign, announced by an unknown light in the sky. In 1938, an aurora appeared over Portugal so bright people thought the city was burning. Auroras don't appear at those latitudes. Scientists still can't explain it. 6 weeks later, Hitler invaded Austria. The 3rd secret hasn't been fully released. Cardinals who read it say it's too disturbing. One said it describes something that will manifest physically and force even atheists to acknowledge the supernatural. That was written by 3 children in 1917. It's still classified in 2025. The questions probably on your mind are, what really happened at Fatima? Why did 70,000 witnesses see the sun fall while astronomers saw nothing? What did Almeida see that he called the observer? What did doctors find in those children's cells? And why is the complete truth still locked in Vatican archives, with classification levels suggesting it's more dangerous than any secret in human history? By the end of this video, you'll understand why October 13, 1917 is called the day atheism died. Not because atheists stopped existing, but because after that day, skeptics lost the ability to say miracles never have evidence, because the evidence is sitting there, documented, witnessed, and impossible to explain. Here's where it all started. May 13, 1917, Portugal is burning churches and executing priests. This matters because what's about to happen isn't occurring in some superstitious village. It's happening in a country that has made atheism its official government policy. The government has outlawed religious education, confiscated church property, and arrested clergy. This is a nation actively trying to erase faith through force. And in this environment, 3 peasant children are about to make a claim so bold that it will force a showdown between materialism and something that refuses to stay invisible. Lucia dos Santos is 10 years old. Her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto are 9 and 7. These children cannot read. They cannot write their own names. They don't know theology or physics. This illiteracy matters for what comes next, because the woman they're about to meet will give them information these children couldn't possibly know. At noon, while tending sheep at a place called Cova da Iria, a flash of light appears above a small oak tree. The children see a woman hovering above the branches, dressed in brilliant white, brighter than the sun. And this woman does something unprecedented in the entire history of religious visions. She makes a testable prediction with 3 months advance notice. She tells these children she will appear on the 13th of every month for 6 months. And on the final appearance, October 13, she will perform a miracle so undeniable that everyone will be forced to believe. Not just the faithful, everyone, the skeptics, the atheists, the scientists coming to disprove it. She's issuing a challenge to the scientific world. I will prove myself on this date, at this time, at this location. Bring your hostile witnesses. Document everything, because I'm going to show you something that will destroy your certainty that the supernatural doesn't exist. Now pause and understand how insane this is as a strategy. If you're faking a miracle, you never give specifics. You stay vague. You say, God will show his glory, or the faithful will be blessed. You absolutely never say, at exactly noon on October 13, at this exact location, I will perform a miracle that will convince even the skeptics. That's not how hoaxes work. That's setting yourself up for the most public, humiliating failure imaginable. The children immediately tell everyone. They don't keep it mysterious. They announce it to their village, to local officials, to anyone who will listen. October 13 noon, Cova da Iria, an undeniable miracle. The government sees an opportunity. Arturo Santos, the mayor and an aggressive atheist, kidnaps the children. He locks them in a room and threatens to boil them in oil if they don't confess they're lying. These are children 10, 9 and 7 years old. He separates them and tells each one the others have already confessed. This is the moment where any childhood fantasy should collapse. But they don't break. Under torture threats, separated, terrified, their stories remain identical in every detail. Lucia tells the mayor exactly what will happen on October 13. She doesn't hedge, she states it as fact. At noon, everyone watching will witness an undeniable miracle. The mayor releases them, confident that when October 13 arrives and nothing happens, he'll arrest them for fraud and crush what remains of Catholic influence in Portugal. But the crowds begin gathering months in advance. And during those gatherings, strange things start happening that suggest something genuine is building toward October 13. June 13, 50 people show up. At exactly noon, the 3 children fall into a trance and begin speaking to something the crowd cannot see. The adults see nothing, no woman, no light, no vision. Just 3 children talking to empty air. The skeptics are already smiling. This looks like childhood delusion. But then details emerge that don't fit. Multiple witnesses, including people who came to disprove this, report hearing a sound like buzzing bees, even though there are no bees present. They report the small oak tree's branches bending downward, as if something heavy is pressing on them, even though nothing visible is there. Several people report a sudden temperature drop around the tree. And the skeptics can't explain this. These aren't believers reporting feelings. These are hostile witnesses reporting physical phenomena. July 13. 5,000 people show up. Anti-religious newspapers are calling it a circus. But their own journalists keep reporting impossible details. At exactly noon, on a clear day, the sunlight dims around Cova da Iria. Not everywhere, just there. The buzzing sound returns, louder. The tree branches bend again, the temperature drops again. Even skeptical journalists are struggling in their articles. They came to mock, but their own observations are undermining their mockery. August 13. The mayor kidnaps the children again to prevent them from attending. 18,000 people show up anyway. The children are locked in a jail cell miles away. They can't be orchestrating anything. And here's where this becomes terrifying. At exactly noon, without the children present, 18,000 witnesses report a loud thunderclap on a completely cloudless day. This is followed by a flash of light. Then what dozens describe as a glowing cloud descends onto the small oak tree, hovers there for several minutes, and rises back into the sky. Avelino de Almeida is there documenting this. In his article, you can sense him struggling. He's trying to maintain his skeptical tone, trying to explain it as atmospheric phenomena, but his own observations keep destroying his explanations. How do you get a thunderclap with no storm? How do you get a glowing cloud that descends, hovers, and ascends in a controlled way? And here's what breaks the mass hysteria explanation. The children aren't there. The central figures are locked in a jail cell miles away. Yet 18,000 people report the same phenomena at the same time. This isn't crowd psychology. This is something happening independently of the children's presence. September 13. 30,000 people crowd into the field. The government is in full crisis. They've tried suppression. It failed. They've tried kidnapping. It failed. They've tried mockery. Their own newspapers keep reporting genuine oddities. And the children continue to insist. October 13, noon, a miracle so undeniable that skeptics will be forced to believe. Almeida writes a preview article dripping with sarcasm, inviting atheists to come watch the spectacle of mass delusion. He's confident, he's prepared. He thinks he's about to witness the greatest public failure of religious faith in modern history. He has no idea that in 4 weeks he'll be in a psychiatric facility describing something he calls the observer to doctors who will note his evident terror. October 13, 1917. Dawn breaks over a disaster. Rain has been falling for hours, turning Cova da Iria into a swamp. 70,000 people have gathered, equivalent to over 200,000 people showing up today with modern transportation. These aren't just locals. Families have walked for 3 days through rain and mud. Scientists have traveled from Lisbon with instruments. Journalists have come from across Europe. Government officials are positioned throughout the crowd to document the failure. Everyone is soaking wet, standing in ankle-deep mud, beginning to wonder if they've made a terrible mistake. Among them are journalists from Portugal's largest atheist newspaper, university professors, scientists, doctors, declared Freemasons. All there for the same reason, to expose 3 peasant children who promised a miracle. They traveled miles in the rain to mock, to laugh, to write the most cutting articles of their careers. The children arrive mid-morning. Witnesses describe Lucia as having an expression of absolute certainty that seems impossible for a child who has promised 70,000 people that God is about to prove himself. Think about the pressure on this child. If nothing happens at noon, she'll be arrested for fraud, her family will be destroyed, and yet witnesses say she shows no anxiety, no fear, no doubt. She simply waits. Francisco and Jacinta stay close to her, silent. Multiple witnesses recorded that the 2 younger children are holding hands, and several people close enough to see their faces describe them as looking sad, as if they already know something the rest of us don't. One witness later testified, "I remember thinking those children looked like they were saying goodbye to something." The rain continues. People are shivering. Some are leaving. The skeptics are starting to celebrate. This is going exactly as they predicted. 70,000 fools standing in the rain, waiting for magic that will never come. Almeida is in the crowd with his notebook, trying to keep the pages dry, already writing his article in his head. As noon approaches, the tension becomes unbearable. 70,000 people fall silent, fixated on 3 peasant children standing by a small oak tree. Even the mockery stops. Everyone is watching. And at exactly noon, verified by dozens of witnesses who checked their pocket watches, Lucia suddenly points to the eastern sky and speaks the words that multiple people recorded, "Look at the sun." And in that moment, 70,000 people make a choice that violates every instinct of self-preservation. They look directly at the sun. And what they see in the next 12 minutes will shatter the scientific establishment's confidence that miracles are impossible. The rain stops. Not gradually, it stops like someone flipped a switch. 1 second it's pouring, the next second silence. The clouds don't drift apart naturally. Multiple witnesses describe them pulling back like a curtain being drawn, creating a perfect circle of clear sky. And through that opening, 70,000 people stare at the sun. The sun appears to be spinning like a wheel. But this isn't a vague impression. Dozens of independent witnesses describe it in identical terms. It's rotating rapidly, throwing off beams of colored light, red, yellow, blue, violet, that sweep across the landscape like spotlights. The light is painting everything in rotating colors. People's faces turn red, then blue, then yellow. The ground changes colors in waves. And yet somehow, this is what breaks physics. People can stare directly at it without pain, without damage, without the burning that should come from looking at something bright enough to cast sharp shadows. Dr. Jose Maria de Almeida Garrett, a professor at Coimbra University who attended specifically to disprove this event, testified, "The sun's disk did not remain still. It spun round on itself in a mad whirl. Then, suddenly, one heard a cry of anguish breaking from all the people. The sun, whirling wildly, seemed to loosen itself from the sky and advance threateningly upon the earth, as if to crush us with its huge and fiery weight. The sensation during those moments was terrible." A university professor, a trained scientist, describing the sun falling from the sky. Attorney Mendez, who came as a committed skeptic, testified, "The sun trembled, made sudden movements outside all cosmic laws. It looked like it was going to fall on us and crush us. I heard people screaming around me. I saw grown men crying like children. I thought we were all going to die." Almeida, Portugal's most aggressive atheist journalist, writes in his article published 3 days later in O Século, the nation's most anti-religious newspaper. Before the astonished eyes of the crowd, whose aspect was biblical as they stood bareheaded, eagerly searching the sky, the sun trembled, made sudden movements outside all cosmic laws. The sun danced, according to the typical expression of the people. But here's the detail that makes this scientifically impossible to dismiss. While 70,000 people at Fatima are watching the sun behave impossibly, astronomers at observatories across Europe report absolutely nothing unusual. The sun is not moving. Earth's orbit is not affected. Solar activity is normal. No other location on the planet reports anything strange. Think about what this means. This wasn't a solar event. This wasn't atmospheric. This was something happening exclusively in Fatima, which means either 70,000 people hallucinated identical experiences, or something was controlling what those specific 70,000 people were seeing. Something chose that crowd. Something showed itself only to them. And that selective visibility is more terrifying than any solar phenomenon could be, because it suggests intention. The sun appears to plunge toward Earth. The crowd's terror becomes absolute. People are screaming, falling to their knees, crying out prayers they haven't said since childhood. Atheists are screaming for God to spare them. Skeptical scientists are on the ground begging for mercy. Parents are covering their children's eyes, preparing for the impact that will kill them all. The crowd panics. Atheists fall to their knees in the mud, screaming for forgiveness. And here's what de Almeida witnessed, the detail that broke him. He was standing next to Dr. Pereira Gens, an atheist physician from Lisbon who'd come to disprove the event. When the sun appeared to fall, Dr. Gens collapsed completely. Almeida helped him up after the phenomenon ended. After about 10 minutes of terror, the sun suddenly returned to its normal position, the colored lights stopped, and everything went back to normal. Dr. Gens was shaking, his face was white, and he looked at Almeida with an expression that Almeida later described as a man who has just seen through a door that should have remained closed. Doctor. Gens grabbed Almeida's arm and whispered, "Did you see it? Inside the light. Not the sun, the other thing, the thing that was watching us." Almeida had seen it. And in his private letters to church officials, now locked in Vatican archives, he described it as a presence, a consciousness, something that seemed to evaluate each person individually. "I felt it observe me, I felt it know me, and I felt it decide something about me." He begged church officials for permission to keep this detail out of his article. He wrote, "The miracle of the sun will be difficult enough for people to accept. But what some of us saw within the miracle, the presence that observed us individually, I fear humanity is not ready to know that when we look at the miraculous, something looks back." But the terror wasn't over, because when people looked down from the sky, they discovered something that violates fundamental laws of physics. Their clothes are completely dry, not damp, not drying, bone dry, as if the hours of rain never happened. 70,000 people who had been soaked to their skin, standing in a swamp of mud, now find themselves in completely dry clothing, standing on ground that has somehow transformed from ankle-deep mud into hard, cracked earth that looks like it's been baking in summer heat for weeks. To evaporate that much water from 70,000 people's clothing, plus several acres of saturated ground, in an instant would require energy equivalent to a small nuclear explosion. It would have generated heat signatures detectable across Europe. It would have caused severe burns, but witnesses report no sensation of heat, no discomfort, no warmth at all. One moment they're wet and shivering, the next moment they're dry. Water can't evaporate without energy. Energy can't disappear. These are fundamental laws. And yet 70,000 witnesses say it happened. Dr. Garrett examines his own clothes in disbelief. He kneels and touches the ground. In his testimony, you can hear him struggling. "I saw people around me who had been soaked to the bone, and suddenly they were completely dry. The ground that had been a swamp was now hard and cracked. I touched it with my hands. I examined it as a scientist, and I have no explanation for this." But here's the detail that haunts researchers. Some witnesses reported their clothes weren't just dry, they felt different. Multiple people testified that their clothing felt new or cleaned, as if it had been laundered rather than simply dried. Some reported stains that had been present before were gone afterward. One woman testified that a tear in her shawl had somehow mended itself. If this testimony is accurate, and it was given by multiple witnesses independently, then what happened wasn't just instant evaporation. It was something that affected matter at a molecular level. Something that could manipulate fabric, remove stains, repair tears. And there's another physical impossibility. During those 12 minutes, witnesses report they could stare directly at the sun without pain, despite the light being bright enough to cast sharp, distinct shadows. That violates basic physics. You cannot have light intense enough to create strong shadows, but gentle enough to look at directly. 20 years after the event, a medical study tried to find evidence of eye damage among Fatima witnesses. They examined hundreds of people who had stared at the sun for 10 to 12 minutes. They expected widespread retinal damage. They found nothing. No elevated rates of eye disease, no unusual damage patterns. Nothing. It's as if what they were looking at wasn't emitting normal light, or as if something was protecting them. And then there are the healings. Maria do Carmo Menezes had been bedridden with tuberculosis for years. Medical records show advanced pulmonary tuberculosis. She was brought to Fatima on a stretcher, too weak to stand. After the 12 minutes, she stood up, walked away from the stretcher, and never showed symptoms again. When doctors examined her 6 months later, they found no trace of tuberculosis. One doctor wrote, "I examined this patient in 1916 and confirmed advanced tuberculosis. I examined her again in 1918 and can find no evidence the disease ever existed. I have no explanation." Jose Alves had been blind in one eye for decades due to an infection that destroyed his cornea. After October 13, he could see from that eye. When doctors examined him, they found a healthy cornea. Not scarred, not partially healed, healthy. One doctor wrote, "Either this man's medical records are fraudulent or something regenerated his cornea. I can find no third explanation." 3 weeks after the miracle, Almeida checked into a psychiatric facility. His intake form includes the doctor's notes, patient reports, recurring fear of being observed, claims to feel the presence that he first encountered at religious event in Fátima. Patient refuses to sleep without light. Patient insists something, decided something about him, and he's waiting to find out what. 3 months after that, Dr. Jens resigned from his position at the university. He moved to a monastery and spent the rest of his life in silence. When he died in 1934, they found a journal in his room. Only one page had writing on it, the same sentence repeated hundreds of times. "It saw me, it knew me, it is deciding." But the physical miracle is only half of what makes Fatima impossible to dismiss. The woman who appeared to the children gave them 3 secrets about the future. And the accuracy of these prophecies is what keeps historians awake at night. The first secret included a prophecy. World War I would end soon, but if humanity didn't repent, a worse war would begin during the reign of the next pope. In May 1917, World War I was still raging. It would continue for another year and a half. The idea of a worse war was unthinkable. And these 3 illiterate peasant children, who don't understand world politics, are told there will be a worse war during the next pope's reign. But the prophecy gets more specific. The children are told this second war would be announced by an unknown light in the night sky. Remember, these are children who've never studied astronomy. They don't know about auroras or atmospheric phenomena. On January 25, 1938, an aurora appeared over Portugal and over much of Europe and North Africa. But this wasn't a normal aurora. Auroras occur near the poles. They don't appear at southern European latitudes. But this one did, and it was so bright it caused mass panic. People in Portugal thought Lisbon was burning. Fire departments were overwhelmed with calls. Scientists were baffled. They still can't fully explain why that aurora was so powerful or why it appeared at impossible latitudes. Lucia, now a nun, immediately wrote to her bishop, "The sign has appeared. The Great War is about to begin." 6 weeks later, March 12, 1938, Hitler annexed Austria. World War II had begun, exactly during the reign of Pius XI, exactly as predicted by 3 illiterate children 21 years earlier, exactly announced by an impossible light in the sky that scientists still can't explain. But the prophecy included another detail. The children were told that Russia would spread its errors throughout the world, promoting wars and persecution of the church. This prophecy was given in May 1917. The Bolshevik Revolution wouldn't succeed until November 1917. At the time, Russia was still ruled by a provisional government, Lenin was in exile, and communism was a fringe movement. These 3 illiterate children who couldn't locate Russia on a map, who didn't understand political systems, somehow knew that Russia would undergo a revolutionary transformation and then spread a godless ideology across the world for decades. They knew this 6 months before the Bolshevik Revolution, 20 years before Stalin's purges, 30 years before the Cold War. And then there's the third secret, the one that's still partially classified. In 2000, the Vatican published what they called the third secret, a vision of a bishop in white being killed by soldiers. They said this predicted the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. But multiple cardinals who read the original text insist there's more. Cardinal Luigi Ciappi stated before his death, "In the third secret, it is foretold that the great apostasy in the Church begins at the top." Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict XVI, read the complete third secret in 1984 and described it as containing information about dangers threatening the faith and the life of the Christian and therefore the world. That was 1984. We're now in 2025, and it's still not fully released. What could three children have been told in 1917 that church officials in 2025 are still afraid to reveal? Father Gabriele Amorth, the Vatican's chief exorcist until his death in 2016, said in an interview, "The third secret speaks of something that will come from outside, not just spiritual evil, but something that will manifest physically. I have read portions of it. I cannot say more except that what is described will force even atheists to acknowledge the supernatural. From outside, manifesting physically, what does that mean?" Francisco and Jacinta were told during one of the apparitions that they would go to heaven soon. This was May 1917. They were 9 and 7 years old, healthy children, and they were being told they would die. Francisco died in April 1919 at age 10. Jacinta died in February 1920 at age 9. The church says they died from the Spanish flu. But both children predicted their own deaths with uncanny accuracy. Francisco, in his final weeks, told his family he would die before Jacinta, but after seeing Our Lady one more time, he saw an apparition 3 days before he died. 3 days later, he died peacefully. Jacinta's death is even more disturbing. In the hospital, suffering from pleurisy and tuberculosis, she told visitors that the lady had appeared to her and asked if she wanted to die soon and go to heaven or live longer in suffering to save more souls. Jacinta, a 9-year-old child in terrible pain, chose to continue suffering. She told multiple witnesses she would die alone in a hospital far from home on a certain night. She was right. She died alone in a Lisbon hospital, far from her family, on the exact night she'd predicted weeks earlier. When Jacinta's body was exhumed in 1935 for the beatification process, medical examiners found unusual preservation despite being buried in quicklime. But that's not the disturbing part. The disturbing part is what they found in her tissue samples. They found cellular oddities they couldn't explain, patterns in her tissue that one doctor described as appearing almost crystalline in structure, as if her cells had been exposed to an energy we cannot identify. These findings were noted in the preliminary report but removed from the final published version. Francisco's body was exhumed in 1952. The same oddities were present, the same crystalline cellular structures, and again, these findings were removed from the official report. What were these children exposed to? What did 6 months of apparitions do to them at a cellular level? Lucia lived until 2005, dying at age 97 as a Carmelite nun. For 88 years, she was questioned, interrogated, investigated, and analyzed. Her testimony remained perfectly consistent for 88 years. Not approximately consistent, perfectly consistent. This is psychologically improbable if she was lying. Liars forget, contradict themselves, add embellishments. Truth-tellers remain consistent because they're simply reporting what they remember. In the 1980s, Lucia was asked in a rare interview if the third secret had begun to unfold. She said, "Parts of it are already happening, but the worst is yet to come. When it comes, everyone will recognize it because it will be unlike anything in history." When pressed about when this would occur, she said, "After my death, I will not live to see the final fulfillment." Lucia died in 2005. As at the time I made this video, we're now 20 years past her death. If the worst hasn't happened yet, what's coming? We're now 108 years past that muddy field in Portugal. We've split the atom, mapped the human genome, discovered quantum mechanics, developed artificial intelligence. Our understanding of physics and psychology has expanded beyond what anyone in 1917 could have imagined. And yet with all this advanced knowledge, all these sophisticated instruments, all these refined theories, we still cannot explain what happened at Fatima. Every natural explanation fails. Every hypothesis requires believing in impossible coincidences or rewriting fundamental physics. And the prophecies that came from those 3 children have proven accurate in ways that suggest they had access to information about the future that shouldn't have been available to anyone in 1917. What makes Fatima terrifying in 2025 is that it refuses to fade into comfortable mythology. This wasn't ancient history witnessed by pre-scientific people. This happened in the 20th century, documented by hostile journalists, witnessed by educated professionals, investigated by skeptical scientists, and verified by medical records. And it forces a choice. You cannot casually dismiss Fatima. The evidence is too strong, the witnesses are too credible, the predictions are too accurate. You're left with three options, and all three require believing something impossible. Option 1. 70,000 people simultaneously experienced identical hallucinations that produced measurable physical effects, occurred exactly as predicted 3 months in advance, didn't damage anyone's eyes, and included accurate prophecies about events decades in the future. For this to be true, we need to completely rewrite our understanding of psychology and physics. Option 2. There was an elaborate conspiracy that fooled atheist scientists, hostile journalists, and government officials, while producing phenomena that violate thermodynamics and somehow predicted World War II and the exact date of the 1938 aurora. This explanation is more miraculous than the miracle itself. Option 3. Something genuinely supernatural occurred on October 13, 1917 in Fátima, Portugal. Something that could manipulate physical matter, predict the future with perfect accuracy, and selectively show itself to specific witnesses. Something that could look back at the people watching it and make individual judgments about them. Those are your choices. All three are impossible according to our current understanding of reality, but one of them happened. Today, Fatima receives millions of visitors annually. It's been investigated and re-investigated by skeptics hoping to find the crack in the story. They haven't found one. The testimonies remain consistent. The physical evidence supports the witness accounts. The prophecies have proven accurate. The atheists who witnessed Fatima were forced to confront something that shattered their certainty. Some changed their worldviews. Others, like Almeida and Dr. Jens, spent the rest of their lives psychologically damaged by what they'd seen, but none of them could honestly say, nothing happened. October 13, 1917 stands as a permanent challenge. What do you do when the impossible happens in front of 70,000 witnesses? What do you do when 3 illiterate children accurately predict an event that violates physics? What do you do when something shows itself to you and then keeps some of its witnesses in psychological terror for the rest of their lives? You can choose to believe it was elaborate delusion, conspiracy, or coincidence. But that choice requires faith too. Faith that 70,000 people were simultaneously wrong in identical ways. Faith that impossible coincidences aligned perfectly. And faith that the witnesses who had breakdowns afterward were simply weak-minded rather than traumatized by something genuine. Or you can accept what those witnesses accepted, that something broke through the normal order of reality on October 13, 1917, something that left evidence demanding a response. Something that proved the universe is stranger and more open to the supernatural than our philosophy admits. Something that is still watching, still deciding, and still waiting for humanity to be ready for the complete truth that remains locked in Vatican archives. The day atheism died wasn't the day belief became easy. It was the day skepticism became harder. It was the day the evidence became too strong to ignore. And more than a century later, that evidence still sits there, documented and witnessed, waiting for honest minds to confront what it means. 70,000 people watched the impossible happen exactly when 3 children predicted it would. And whatever they saw, whatever looked back at them from inside that light, some of them never recovered from the encounter. That's not ancient mythology. That's documented psychological trauma from witnessing something that shouldn't exist. Avelino de Almeida walked into that field as Portugal's most confident atheist, ready to write the article that would humiliate religious believers forever. He left that field broken, terrified, unable to escape the feeling that something had seen him, known him, and decided something about his fate. Dr. Pereira Gens walked into that field as a respected physician and scientist. He left that field and abandoned everything he'd built because he could no longer practice medicine knowing what he now knew about the nature of reality. These weren't weak-minded people. These weren't superstitious peasants. These were educated professionals who came to debunk a miracle and instead witnessed something that destroyed their certainty about how reality works. And the worst part? According to the sealed portions of the third secret, according to Lucia's warnings, according to the prophecies that haven't yet been fulfilled, whatever appeared at Fatima in 1917 isn't finished with humanity. It showed itself once to prove it exists. The question that should keep you awake is, when it shows itself again, will it still be offering salvation, or will it be bringing the judgment that Lucia said would be unlike anything in history? The observer is still watching. The decision is still being made. And somewhere in Vatican archives, the complete truth waits behind classification levels that suggest what those 3 children learned is more dangerous than any secret in human history. What really happened at Fatima? 70,000 witnesses saw it. Scientists couldn't explain it. Prophecies proved it was real. And the complete story is still too dangerous to tell. That's not religion. That's documented history, and it's still waiting for an explanation that our science cannot provide.